is one of my favorite aspects of being a creative, of being a cultural worker, artist residencies. It's like camp for creative grown-ups in beautiful places where you get nurtured and relationship build. And I have to say, Pocoapoco in Oaxaca, Mexico is one of my top 3 residencies of all time. Definitely because of the people. And so that's why it's a huge honor. And I'm so super excited to be in conversation today with Jessica. I'm going to go ahead and ask Jessica to introduce herself, tell us what your practice is, tell us a little bit about Poco and who you are as a person. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm the director and founder of Pocoapoco, which is here in Oaxaca in Mexico. I've kind of moved through a lot of creative practices in my life, from visual arts to writing. But I'd say the thing that really kind of defines the practice that I have now is creating spaces for this exchange of ideas and experiences and practices, and really experimenting about what that can look like. And so Pocoapoco obviously has been kind of the most ongoing experiment and project, and has changed a lot over the years. And then I'm also interested in kind of what that looks like in forms of publication, dialogues, and things like that. I grew up in the States, in Minneapolis, and then lived in San Francisco and New York before I moved to Oaxaca. I'm a mom. I have a 3-year-old. That's my biggest practice at the moment. And Pocoapoco is an arts and cultural organization and residency. We host 4 longer residencies every year, and then also around 6 shorter residencies every year. We also have exhibitions, workshops. We work with a collective of artists here in Oaxaca, but really it all centers around this idea of conversation and relationships, and how those can be enhanced through creative practice.
I want to back up for a second. Thank you. And ask everybody, just drop in the chat where you are and what your practice is. And remember that, first off, I'm an outlier creative. I've never fit into the boxes easily. And that I intentionally, out of all the residencies and the folks who I still remain in close contact and friendship with, in terms of current residency directors, I intentionally invited Jessica to speak with me because Poco is such an interdisciplinary space. It's curated that way, very welcoming and inclusive. And it's been my experience. I can just say really quickly, before I applied for my very first residency, maybe 10 or so years ago, I was in a women's creative circle, and I remember saying, oh God, that sounds so great, artist residencies. I think I would like to apply. And there was a very vocal person who was like, oh no, that's not for you. Like, you don't have enough experience and you don't have a strong enough portfolio. Like, this woman was nowhere near a decision maker. Okay. So that's partially why I'm doing this, because I'm like, there's I think a preconception that artist residencies are only for visual artists or musicians. You have to be the fanciest, you have to have the most robust, detailed, linear, professional portfolio in order to apply. And that just simply is not the case. I think you do have to apply for residencies that hold resonance and our values aligned. So with all of that being said, I want to also back up and just introduce, because there's like a handful of people I don't know. My name is Mijan Celie Tho-Biaz. I'm an oral historian, sometime curator. I guess somebody probably would say something about social engagement art practice. I would not actually, unless I was forced to check a box, That's not exactly how I would identify. I identify as a cultural worker, and I determined this past summer that I would do this open studio conversation series as a give back, especially to the community of oral historians. That's why, like, I could tear up because Dr. Amy Starczewski is on this call. She did, with Fanny organizing, this 1 year plus, I'm sure, but I dropped in my very first year as an oral historian. There was an open chat series, and that is how I got my start. I would show up every single month for free. Amy never charged, Groundswell never charged, but to get mentorship and to move myself along in my oral historian and cultural worker practice. So I'm sure, not even sure, I'm 1,000,000% positive the next open studio conversation, I want to hear from you all what would be helpful out of my practice, who I can be in conversation publicly, that would be informative and educational. Is it my IP attorney? Is it the person who copyrights and copy edits when I need some support and help? Is it a particular cultural worker collaborator? Is it a journalist who covers, like I'm thinking about in the spring, some upcoming work? Yeah, this is my give back year in a very specific way, which is a return to what I was able to receive for free. So enough about that. I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica in this conversation, which is why y'all are here. Faith, I see you. Welcome. I'm so happy you were able to join. Why Poco? Why Oaxaca? Why is it in the top 3? I would say because Poco represents a great space that's curated exceptionally well, very skillfully, for creatives and cultural workers who can cross-train. It's the place where I designed my California oral history project, where I designed and curated that Van Jones, Maria Teresa Kumar project, and got wonderful nourishment and support. It's the place where I have like lifelong friends as a result, and not just the residents, but also, I mean, I don't know if it's like misstepping, but also the people who work at Poco. I also want to say there's something that is very unique that is rare, which is there are the international residents and there are the local residents. And I don't know how you all managed to pull this off, Jessica, but they wove both together seamlessly. It wasn't like an afterthought, neither group. It was, we have this one residency, and there are local people who are coming from Mexico, but specifically Oaxaca. And there are these international folks like Maria Gracia coming from, honey, where are you coming from? Luanda.
Angola.
Where in Africa? Where?
Angola.
Angola, okay. Coming from very far away. Stina's Haitian, Nani is Indonesian. So they just did an exceptional job. It also was the first residency where it was all BIPOC women. I mean, like, fancy that. So going to the first question I have for you, Jessica, I really want to understand how you came to form Poco and how you came to choose and how you continue to choose. How do you curate and select residents? How do you weave folks? Because I actually don't understand. I've been in maybe 15 residencies now in the last decade. And like I said, top 3, I'm gonna be quiet.
Well, first of all, I want to say that this is the first time I've done like a Zoom conversation like this, so go easy on me. And also, if my son runs into the room, I'm sorry. But thank you so much. It's a really, it's a huge honor to have you say that, because I mean, this project is something that has been growing and changing over the years, but like the biggest part of that obviously is the people who are coming through and what they bring to the space. And so obviously everyone who's coming through is also teaching us and kind of helping us think about what direction we want the project to go in. But I was going to say, I mean, it was interesting for you to say how this person was talking about artist residencies and had this idea of what you need and what you should do. And I think, I mean, Pocoapoco really came to be like very organically, and with this idea that for me, I've always had a big creative community of people who would never define themselves as artists, who would define themselves as researchers, or who are really working in pretty much every field you could think of, the most creative minds, but no one who would apply to an artist residency. And for me, that always seemed like, well, like a loss, because I know how much all of us really need that time and space to reflect on our practices and really think about not just if it's serving other people, but also if it's serving us. And in general, kind of in the day-to-day, we don't create time for that. I think what we do day to day is create these strategies for efficiency, which are not necessarily the things that end up feeding our practices or feeding the people around us. So anyway, the idea really of Pocoapoco from the very beginning was to create a space for people who are working in creative fields, but not necessarily people who are defining themselves as visual artists, not the people who would apply to the residencies that I had heard of at that point. And I mean, I think over the years, it's just kept changing and morphing. And especially with the team that we have now, which is just an incredible group of women. I think between all of us, the 5 of us, we've really defined what we feel like is important to us in a space. And with that in mind, that also keeps changing. But I think what Mijan, what you were saying about selecting people is that when we receive these applications from people, it tends to be very clear the people who speak the same language as we do. And I think that in general, the people who come to Pocoapoco first are really people who want to think about people, right? Like they want to think about their relationships with people. They want to think about how their practice is either enhancing or questioning or serving those relationships they have with people and have to the world, who are really interested in the human experience and who are interested in their own human experience. And within their creative practice, I think for most of within the space that we've created, we talk less about what exactly your practice is, what the product is, and more about what is your relationship to your practice. Why do you have it? How does it serve you? What does it do for you? Why do you need this practice in your life? And how does it allow you to better understand yourself, communicate what you want to say, and also connect you to other people? And so I think in general, really interested in exploring creative practice as a tool and a form of being or existing better than as just a way of making art. And that really dictates who comes to the space, are the people who speak about their practice in that way, and who obviously have thought critically about their relationship to their work, to their community, and how those connect and overlap. Was that at all the answer to your question?
But listen, I have a real clear follow-up question. Because there's the part of me that's now, present day Mijan feels totally fine and at ease applying for residencies. The me 10 years ago, emerging oral historian, emerging cultural worker, I want you to talk to that Mijan and explain again, who do you all really not just attract, but who do you select and why? Because I think about even in the cohort this year, or not cohort might not be the right, but the residents, I'm like, okay, there were 2 people who either had doctoral degrees or were going for doctoral degrees, a translator, at a tech company. Maria, you are a phenomenal singer. Stina is a weaver, and all folks have varying degrees of years of either classical training. I'm thinking Julio, like we would pop up at restaurants, hotels. His artwork is acclaimed and all over town. Like, yeah, so I guess, can you go a little
more
deeper?
concrete.
Yeah, like how do you all really select and weave?
I mean, I think part of it, like you say, is that we all really want there to be like this interdisciplinary conversation and an interpersonal conversation, right? So really thinking about people who are coming from different disciplines, different places, different experiences, and then how all of those end up connecting through their practices and through these kind of basic human things. So a big part of it is thinking about that. I think also there's a strong pull towards people who are working kind of at this intersection of creative practice and research, or in some cases academia, or these practices that wouldn't necessarily fit into what we consider to be creative practices, right? So we've had a lot of people who are working, definitely a lot of people who are working in social work, cultural work, but also people who are working as lawyers, people who are working as doctors, nurses, really all kinds of fields, but who are either have a creative practice on the side that is feeding that work, or who are really exploring how that field can be re-navigated with the lens of creative thought or creative practice.
Okay, now you're making 100% sense to Mijan across the timeline.
Yes.
I am going to open it up to whatever questions folks have. However, I want to kick it off by asking, you've talked us through to today, where, like in terms of the arc, where's Poco headed for 2023 and beyond? Anybody who might be making an application, now's the time to really like come back to the conversation and tune in. I'm doing you a solid favor.
Well, I think really what we're looking at doing is that for us, like there's always been the sense of like, what more can we do? Like more exhibitions and more conversations and things like that. But I think really what we're aiming to do in 2023 is just kind of continue to hopefully deepen the work that we've been doing already. Think about the ways that these spaces can keep generating conversation, definitely the ways that they can be more accessible and open to the community here in Oaxaca. So with that in mind, a lot more public events, workshops, open houses, really starting to kind of open the space up in a different way that I think we're able to do now that the organization kind of has created this solid rhythm of the residencies and things like that. But I think also in general, really just continuing these conversations and really thinking about where else those conversations can go, where else these interactions can go, how else can they be housed? I mean, similarly to what we're doing today, how can we continue those conversations after the residency and see where people's work is going after they've been in that space.
Thank you, Jessica, for saying yes. Before we all log off, I want you to share, how can people remain connected to POCO to understand when the upcoming application rounds open and close, if there is a monthly letter or some such thing?
Well, thank you for inviting me, and also thank you for all of your patience with this. On our website, we have a page of open calls. So our next open call is going to be opening January 15th, and that's for all of the residencies between September 2023 and April 2024. And so that opens January 15th and closes March 1st. And the application will be up on the website. I was just telling Mijan that we do send out newsletters. They are incredibly inconsistent, but I'm sure that in 2023, they are going to be consistent and they're going to come out every month. So you can sign up also for the newsletter on our website. And that's another way to stay in contact. And we'll definitely, especially after this, we'll be sending out newsletters to remind you of the upcoming open calls. We also have signups for workshops that are open all year round, and those are open to really anyone who wants to take part. But they're a great way to kind of just experience the community around the residency, the artists that we're working with here, and yeah, to kind of start taking part in those dialogues.
Thank you. Also, Instagram, you get a chance to see like who are, I mean, that's one of my biggest tips for not just Poco, any residency, to take a look and see who are the people who are current residents. Basically, that's the list of folks who are values aligned with the curators for the residencies. And then to ask yourself, do I feel like this is a good fit for me? Not just to approach it from would I fit in, should I apply, but would this be a good group of people for me? Okay.
Yep.
So,
Please take a look at the page that has all of the bios of our former residents, because like Mijan, they're all really amazing. And I feel like also represent a lot of what we're hoping to do there in that space.
you're so kind. Thank you.